There is a fifth dimension.
About the unknown.
Beyond that which is known to man.
The Garden of Thought.
The Babylon Project was our last best hope for peace.
Unexplained.
Mythologies.
This is the dimension of imagination. It is an area which we call
The Garden of Thought with Jeff Lippman.
Eventually, our sun will grow cold and go out.
Whether a thought is spoken or not, it is a real thing, and it has power.
It won't just take us. It'll take Marilyn Monroe and Lao Tzu and Einstein and Morobuto.
The mystery of life isn't a problem to solve, but a reality to experience.
All of this was for nothing. Unless we go to the stars.
Let's make sure that history never forgets the name.
The Garden of Thought.
Welcome everyone into the garden, and we are welcoming in a new guest again, though, from our friends over at what is it? It's Saskatchewan. I keep forgetting Shadowpaw Press. Shadowpaw Press. That's the term. How I forget that, I don't know. But this is a Kaitlyn Stewart spy thriller by Sparling, who herself is an opera singer, or was an opera singer, and her character in the book is also an opera singer who just happens to be recruited by the CIA to be an international spy, because being an opera singer is a perfect cover. And the backdrop is in the Cold War, and we're lucky enough to have the actual author, Kay Sparling. So welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Sure. So, all right. So we were talking pre-production, and right now you're living in the Midwest, but that's probably not where you're from originally. I don't know, but how does one get into a life of international opera? And you also mentioned a sacred singer. I can suspect what that is, but I want to know what that is. So, how do you get into international opera, and what is a sacred singer?
Well, my story is actually pretty incredible, because not only did I grow up in the Midwest, I grew up in the middle of a cornfield, in central Midwest. I mean, big breadbasket, country. So it is very strange how life, takes turns, right? So I was discovered at a very, very early age that I had a really nice singing voice. And to make a long story short, by the time I was 7, I was singing my first professional gig on stage as the smallest Von Trapp child, Gretel, in The Sound of Music.
Sure.
And so my parents, especially my mother, had a lot of time that was given, like taking me to vocal lessons and productions in the bigger cities around us and that kind of thing, especially in the summer. So start out not being the average, country girl, right? Already singing professionally on stage in big cities. And of course, in my whole, area, always being asked to sing. And so by the time that I'm a teenager, I'm doing my chores, and then I jump on my horse and I run him down to the covered bridge that was in the valley near us, and I would let him graze on the side of the brook, and I would climb up in the covered bridge and start belting out Broadway tunes, because man, I was going to be a Broadway star. And I found out later, many years later, at my father's funeral, that people were coming up to me that lived in that area and said, for years I'd go out on my porch and listen to you sing, because it would just go all the way down the valley, because it echoed so well on the bridge. And, so I think that's a great memory. And for my 8th grade birthday, my dad bought me a map of the 5 boroughs of New York City. And I started putting pins on all the Broadway theaters, I wanted to sing at. And so, then I go to college and they're like, you can't get a degree in voice performance only. What if it doesn't work out for you? You better have, something to fall back on. So
nobody says that about anything else. Nobody says you can't get a degree in philosophy or political science. What if it doesn't work out for you? And there's a pretty good chance those things aren't going to work out for you either. I don't,
Or psychology, or a lot of things that people get their degrees.
Sure.
Yeah. But anyway, so when I picked the school, I wanted to pick somewhere that would give me a lot of vocal ability, performance abilities and training, but also very good in music ed. So I was a double major, and speaking of philosophy, I was a philosophy minor, and got my training, and did continue my professional Broadway singing a few years out of college, and I was also starting to do some jazz singing because I was living in Kansas City. And it's a pretty, strong jazz center. And I was singing at the Vista Hotel one night, and some lady, a little Turkish lady, comes up to me, and she ends up being an opera singer. She says, I just started teaching at the conservatory here in Kansas City, and your voice is just amazing. I mean, she basically told me she thought I was based on jazz, and that, anytime I wanted to talk to her, she thought she could get me a full ride scholarship, to study opera this time. And at first I thought she was kind of crazy. I was teaching in a big high school in Topeka, Kansas. And I was like, I don't know. 3 months later, I decided to give it a try. So that fall, I entered graduate school and started, studying opera. And halfway through that degree, my dean comes up to me and he's like, hey, you're just really doing a great job. You're really, hitting those competitions. You're apprenticing at the City Lyric. I think that it'd be great if you tried out for like a Fulbright or a Rotary International, somewhere that's going to send you to Europe to get opera training, and we'll pay for it. Well, who wouldn't say yes to that? Heck, And so I did. I got both of those grants. So that put me over there for 2 years. Now, they said you get 3 choices. Well, my first choice was Italy, because I sang a lot of Italian opera. And then I put Germany, and then I put Austria, because those were the centers, where most opera was going on. And I got third choice, which didn't make me happy. But hey, you gotta take what you can get in those situations.
Sure.
So off I go to Vienna, Austria, and I'm going to be an apprentice at the Vienna State Opera. And it's a pretty big deal.
Well, Vienna's not so bad. I hear Vienna's a beautiful city, very clean, very safe.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're talking 1987.
Well, okay.
Okay. Things weren't quite as safe at that time, because quite frankly, they had Kurt Waldheim as their prime minister at that time. And he had just a few years before won on the Nazi ticket.
Oh, yay. So, all right.
Yeah.
1987, that was post-Brezhnev, but pre-Yeltsin. Were we like in the Andropov era?
Yeah. And so we're all kind of dicey over here as far as what's going on in the USSR. What's going on with all the satellite countries that they took over after World War II? Those were becoming a real social problem, because USSR would not admit it. They were absolutely, in an economic crisis. And so what did they do? near the end of the Cold War. Well, they let all these countries go and say, okay, you're not part of the USSR anymore. And I visited Budapest, Hungary right after they were released. And I stayed in a 5-star hotel. And I was lucky if I had running water and electricity on the same day.
Wow.
The infrastructure of all these countries just collapsed because, okay, for instance, Bratislava, for instance, beautiful city, used to be called the second Paris of Europe, right? And it was cheaper to go there than go to Paris. So people would just flood there. Well, after the USSR took it over, they actually made it the major tank manufacturing city. And basically almost everyone either made tanks or did some kind of service to that. Okay. Right. And so when they pulled out, nobody has a job. Nobody can feed their families. And this is going on in Hungary, Poland, Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia. It just goes on and on, right? All right. So what are these people going to do? Well, they're going to pack up what they can. And they're going to ride or walk to the nearest Western country to try to find a new life, try to find jobs and housing, etc. Well, a lot of them, the closest place was Vienna, not Vienna, but Austria. Mm-hmm. And of course, they are going to, go towards a larger city than a small town because they think there's going to be more help there and more jobs there.
Sure.
So Vienna gets this big influx of these immigrants. And, I just told you he was prime minister. So do you think he's going to be open to all these people coming into his country with open arms and saying, sure, we'll help you?
The history of the universe tells us not usually.
Exactly.
More like a build the wall kind of thing.
A real crisis. Oh, yeah. And so you have this major crisis, and the Catholic Social Services, the Mennonite Relief Fund, the UN, Red Cross, all these places start assembling on the edge of town of the city. And it was Catholic-owned land that had not been developed. They just start putting all these tents up in, camps. It's a refugee camp, and it's huge. And I'm there as an apprentice, and I also was asked about sacred singing. Most opera singers, in between opera gigs, do a lot of oratorio singing. Now, the only difference between opera and oratorio is that opera is usually not, the story is not from the Bible, and it's, we have costumes, sets, that kind of thing.
Like in helmets.
Oratorio is like seeing Handel's, Messiah, Christmas. There is an orchestra, there is a chorus, and there are soloists, but there's no settings and costumes and that kind of thing.
Well, you're singing Ave Maria as opposed to the Nutcracker or something.
Yeah, exactly. But it still takes classical training.
Understood. Yeah, I get the difference.
It's always come from obviously biblical text.
Right. Right. You do Joseph Anna's Technicolor Dreamcoat? Is that the crossover?
No, that's musical theater.
Oh, okay.
No, that would not that would be considered Broadway musical theater, not sacred. But you're right on the Ave Maria and all those kind of things. And so, I wish I had an extra $1 for every Ave Maria I've ever sang.
I'm sure.
It's like, woo! But anyway.
Very popular at weddings.
So, apprentices don't pay too much. They're required in order to get your AGMA union card, but to be international, you have to do at least 2 of them.
Wait, what does AGMA stand for?
American Guild of Musical Artists. So, like Broadway people have their own union, which is part of Equity,
sure.
Which is also acting, stage acting, and of course, you have your film, unions, and then opera had its own. So that is only AGMA's own opera.
All right, power to the people.
Yeah, and so anyway, we have to do 2 of these. But like I say, they usually put you room and board, but you're not make it much at all.
Sure.
And of course, you always had to be in these very expensive cities, like mine was, Vienna and New York City. Very, very expensive places to live. So you end up having to get mentors and sponsorships and all that kind of thing. Well, I was sponsored, by my grants, and then I did have a couple mentors as well. So I'm singing at churches and cathedrals, I should say, whenever I can, because it's just a few extra bucks in my pocket, so I can go out to eat once in a while or something like that. And so get to be friends with some of the priests, and they're all involved in this refugee camp. And so it doesn't take them long to ask me to come volunteer there. And I had never been to a refugee camp in my life. And first time was just shocking as could be. And, immediately I want to do whatever I can to help. And of course, one thing that is very prevalent about all refugee camps is there is nothing to do all day except, get in line for meals
Right.
and to sleep. Just the basics. The kids don't have any toys. They don't have any. They're not going to school. The people don't have jobs. For all ages, they just sit there all day, basically. And I saw a couple little boys taking a big ball of duct tape and trying to play soccer. No, that's broke my heart.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, here I am at the Vienna State Opera, and I am going to balls and receptions and stuff with the highest echelons of society. The richest people in Vienna are the opera aficionados.
Of course.
So why don't I go to them and see if I can get some of the more liberal ones, to donate some money, to get the kids toys. And immediately I know I could get some entertainment going because I'll just talk to my friends. And we won't go there and sing opera for them, but, I knew a puppeteer. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to get him to come out and do a puppet show for the kids, this kind of thing, find an interpreter, because most of them were speaking Slavic languages, and that just happened to be languages I did not know.
Right.
I knew a little Russian, but I didn't know, Czechoslovakian or those, languages. So I, started getting involved, and that's when I found out there was a ploy by the very same people that let these people go from the USSR. They came up with a scheme, and it was the KGB from Russia, or USSR at that time, and the East Germans, which was the GDR. And they decided that everybody was having economical problems. GDR was having their real problems. So they decided, well, we're going to go into the West where these camps are, and we're going to promise these people everything. We're going to promise them jobs and housing and health care and education for their kids. Now, you'd have thought these poor folks would have been suspicious of this, considering how they were treated during the regime of the USSR and after they were released. But they're desperate.
Right.
And desperate people do desperate measures, right?
Sure.
So what happens is they go for it. So they say, all right, on this particular night, we'll take you to the train station, we'll put you on a train, and we'll get you over there. But what would really happen is they would stop in the Alps somewhere, in some little tiny alpine village with a tiny train station, and literally have human auctions. It was human trafficking.
Wow.
And all the children and the old people and anyone that could not work or wasn't beautiful would be sent back west to the camps. So the children and grandparents and such were completely separated from their families. So those children just were orphans at that point. And then all the working able people were auctioned off to large farm organizations, manufacturers, this kind of thing. And when they get there, it would actually be nothing more than a work camp, just like the concentration camps in World War II. They could not escape. They were treated badly. They they were not taken care of, and if they died, well, then they just got replaced.
Who were they mad at then? The refugees, were they mad at the USSR for tricking them, or they were mad at the people on the other end for basically being complicit with it? I mean, was part of the scheme or the plan for the USSR to undermine the West by sort of making it say the West was making these false promises and it's no better there? Or was it the folks
No, it
knew?
wasn't like that.
Okay.
That came later. That is a very good point. No, at this point, no, the refugees are just, shocked that they were let go by the USSR and they have no jobs anymore.
How do you find, how does a young opera apprentice learn that there's this ploy? Is it just this obvious, or is it because you were traveling in the circles of the royalty and the elites because of your skills, or were they just so loose with the information? How does this come to you? I can't imagine a scenario where it would come to me. The
priests were my first informers.
Oh, okay.
And they were just hitting me up for like humanitarian reasons. And then once I got there, I ran into spies. And they decided they wanted to use me to get information, because just what you just said.
But how do you run into a spy, and how do they let you know you're a spy? And are you suspicious? Say, I'm a spy, and you're like, well, you're not supposed to tell me you're a spy. I mean, how do you?
They would never say that. No, they would just come up and say, I'm very, I'm looking into this. I'm investigating it. I'm trying to stop this human trafficking.
Do they have cards like I'm from the cultural attaché from the UN, or I'm working for the U.S. Embassy, or the? Yeah,
they would make it vague at first. It's just like they would let me know they were American or British, because I ran into MI6 a lot too. But yeah, they'd always say they were ambassadors or. Collecting information for ambassadors, so and so, blah, 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 blah. They weren't about to tell me they were CIA.
Undersecretary of this, or assistant liaison to cultural exchange, or this, that, the other thing.
Whatever, yeah. And no cards for everything.
No cards, okay.
Like that. And you'd see them more than once, and they wouldn't approach you the first time.
Right.
I was going every day almost. And so,
took 3 or 4 times before they nodded and said, so.
Yeah.
This was before Joey Buttafuoco, not Joey Buttafuoco, Joey Tribbiani from Friends going, how you doing?
Yeah, exactly. So, you'd have a meal with them there at the camp or whatever, and they get to know you, and then, different things happen. Like one kind of wanted to start a relationship with me, because they're trying to vet you and see if you're trustworthy and where your alliances lie. I mean, I could be some, American neo-Nazi that thinks all this stuff's really, correct.
Well, you could also just be a young woman looking to date. I mean, what kind of scheme is that? It's very convenient.
Very, So I mean,
you're in your 20s now, right?
Yeah. I was 28 at the time.
Well, I mean, jeez. I mean, all right, I'll leave it alone. But it seems like a pretty lazy scheme to think that just because you're interested in dating, people who aren't, in refugee camps but are trying to help others, then they're affiliated with, successful governments. That might be interesting to a 28-year-old. I don't know. That doesn't seem like a honey trap.
You don't know how much vetting they do on you before they approach you.
Gotcha. No, I do not. I clearly. I am not a spy. If anyone thinks that, I'm really bad. My mission is really long term.
Yeah. Let's just say they're very good at their jobs. Okay.
Fair enough.
And definitely. I mean, if I got a Fulbright, then do you think that it'd be pretty easy to vet me?
I would think there's lots of information on it. Yeah.
Absolutely. And do you remember that I wanted to go to Italy? but I got put in Austria.
Right. You got your third choice. So there are two other places where they can honeypot you into.
Exactly. So, who knows what kind of vetting was going on? Who knows what that placement was? I mean, I had 5. I mean, I could have been the kind of person that went, "Hey, I don't want to go to a refuge camp. That's really sad. I don't want to see that, smell that, deal with that, emotional baggage shit,
Right.
But I didn't. I went, oh my God, So, yeah, I mean, I think that the empathy was there from the beginning. And so, I put myself in that position to be approached, I suppose.
So part of the backdrop of your fiction is your nonfiction. Part of it's actually your biography, and from there, at what point did this turn into the germ of what would become a series of fiction books?
Just being over there for long periods of time, and seeing this whole first mission, how it turned out, and knowing that there are 21 million people being human trafficked today as we speak worldwide, I thought maybe this book, there's not a lot of books, first of all, where the spy books where the protagonist is a female.
That's true.
Okay. There just wasn't at that time in this era. Okay. Not even period, but especially in the Cold War era. So a lot of people, as I started writing this book, I found out don't know much about the Cold War. It's not something we really learned a lot about in school.
Which is so weird.
A lot of us lived it.
Right.
I lived it, while I was growing up. But I wasn't really taught about it much. And so I thought, well, if I could write this book and show what it's like to be a refugee and the things that happen to me and what governments let happen to me, maybe I can strike some awareness of what's going on today, for instance, with Ukraine and Syria, any of the countries that are in really, really dangerous situations and what happens to those citizens. So that's why I wrote Mission THAW. Now, my second book is she'll have a mission about Bosnia, and that's about ethnic cleansing. So I always write the most happy subject.
Absolutely. Can we put a pin? Can we go back for a second? I mean, because right now we're in the middle of 2025, sort of going towards the end of it, and human trafficking, big story because Epstein or Epstein files or not files is a big story. P. Diddy was a big story. Vince McMahon is a big story. Human trafficking everywhere. What was human trafficking that you experienced? What would be the definition of it and examples of it so that we can try to apply it to these sort of more famous, that are famous now. I mean, these shows are evergreen, but I assume most people will listen to it within the first couple of months of it being published. So is it the same or very different than what we're hearing about in the news now in 2025?
In a lot of ways, I'll zoom in on female that are
sure
human trafficked. Okay. Very, very simple. So in my book, there's some really graphic things because they uncover that what happens to the women, and those women in those auctions, I would say they were average 35 down to about 11 or 12 years old.
Ooh.
A lot of them would be bought for individual men to use as, for sex. Don't know how they were always treated by those men. I would suspect not very good. And then a lot of the more unfortunate ones were brought to underground men's clubs in East Berlin, where they literally would have gang rapes and torture. And men would pay to go and be a part of this or to watch it.
Now, this is part of your real life experience, not stuff that you made up for the book. It might have made its way into the books, but this was part of real life stuff that you saw.
Absolutely,
and
absolutely. And, I saw slides of it, and,
Sure.
Where other people had been undercover taking that, yes.
Right.
So, you're saying, wow, that wouldn't really ever happen, like here in the United States. Well, let me tell you, there's men's clubs like that right now in some of our major cities. So, nothing has changed with the torture and the absolute, taking of all civil liberties of these people. And that can happen to American women, just like it can to Syrian women or Ukrainian women.
I'm sure there's a lot of poverty and desperation. So
absolutely, there's just more of it now, than there was back then. But nothing's changed, So when you speak about those people, I doubt, unless you were there to eyewitness, you could ever imagine the atrocities that happened to these women.
no, and I don't want to imagine the atrocities. I don't want my mind to be that creative, prurient, demented. I mean, watch a few horror movies is enough for me.
Yeah, exactly. So you get the idea.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm also telling this story, getting away from the human trafficking. This is a feminist story. I mean, Kaitlyn Stewart's a glass ceiling breaker. I mean, she was the only woman in that whole area of CIA and MI6 at the time working on this mission.
Could she kick ass too? Was she like a fighter, like James Bond? Could she do all the kung fu?
The truth was, no, she was an opera singer. And I mean, she was a tough person. She came from good pioneer stock, but no, once she said yes to the CIA, she had to be trained in martial arts. She had to be trained in firearms, everything.
Okay, well, I repeat the question. After the training, could she kick ass?
She could if she had to.
Did she?
But her mission was to be an absolute information gatherer in those upper echelons of society that she could go into that the other spies could.
Okay, she wasn't there to kick ass. She wasn't there to seduce. She was there to be the artist that everybody wanted to know because they wanted to say they knew the celebrity.
Yeah, so then that way she could get into, some big businessman's villa and be invited in there all the time.
The owls.
And then, start planting bugs because back then that's what they had to do.
Right, the Illuminati, whatever the cabal was at the time, Hail Hydra, whomever.
Absolutely. And so, and the idea was that, she had made a pact with her chief that she never wanted to kill someone unless she absolutely had to. And he made a pact with her and said, yes, I will always protect you. I have combats with you. You don't have to worry about that. That's just a backup in case, you're the only one standing. You can try to defend yourself. But she said, I do not want to be a part of that. And through this whole mission, she comes very close, but she never has to kill anyone. But she's almost killed several times. So, she's considered what they call a high-profile agent.
Gotcha. Let me ask you this. So there's several books. So clearly they were successful. Do you have any idea who your audience is?
Well, actually, I just released my first book. So
I thought you had a bunch of books.
I'm writing my second book right now.
Oh, I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
Yeah, I have. No, that's fine. I have been playing. Yeah, this should be a trilogy. The second book is about Bosnia, like I was saying, and that's going to be one where she's really been promoted a lot by 1992, and she's working undercover, not as an opera singer, obviously in a war zone. She's at undercover as a UN or Red Cross volunteer or organizer, and her sidekick ends up being a priest she met in the first book that goes AWOL because he witnesses what's going on in Bosnia, with the massacres, and he tries to get the Catholic Social Services involved, and they say, no, we don't want to go in there. And so he goes AWOL and goes to the CIA and says, I want to help. Because he knows 4 Slavic languages, which none of the other team does. And so he becomes very, very important. So it's a really cool team up. First time in the mission THAW, she's teaming up with Clyde Matthews, the best spy in the free world from MI6. He's the real James Bond person. Second time she's with this priest. And she ends up going rogue because she's trying to get people rescued before they come to massacre. That's not happening time after time. And so her and the priest run and try to save a bunch of orphan boys, and that's what that's about. And then the third book, she's actually retired and started a music school. And then she's living in New York City, and 9/11 happens, and she's called right back in. So that's called, so the second book's Mission Impromptu, and the third one's Mission Hometown, and, or Homefront, excuse me. And that will be the end of the Kaitlyn Stewart story. Those are the 3 major stories in Compton.
So she thought she was retired, but they bring her back in after 9/11.
Yeah, and the CIA said you never really retire till you die. You know?
So where's she going to be singing opera after 9/11? Iraq, Afghanistan? I mean, someplace else?
Well, no. Very interesting enough, and this is, so she hardly gets to use her voice at all in the second book. In the third book, actually, they do use her in 2 ways. First way is, soon as that was happening, people were being sent all over the globe. We were trying to say, the CIA was trying to say, who's on our side? Where does each country stand? And the best way you can find that out is get your boots on the ground and go find out. What are the British people, public saying about 9/11? What are the French saying? What are, blah, blah, blah. And so one of the best ways to do that is, do you remember those rallies they were having in this country, particularly in New York City, but also around Europe and such? Where they had stadium fulls of people and everybody was waving American flags, and
sure,
they had speeches and singing. Well, Kaitlyn Stewart ends up going and being kind of a USO person.
Gotcha.
And she's obviously not going to be singing opera. She's going to be, she's at that point, she's going to be singing a lot of God Bless America, that kind of stuff. Okay. And then she's called back to New York City by Mayor Giuliani, who she had sent several times at the Gracie Mansion. And he says, hey, we're going to have to do all these state funerals for all the fallen service people. And you have been a Catholic, and you have clearance, and you have the voice to endure these long funerals day after day. Would you be interested? Well, Kaitlyn has to say yes, because all of her opera gigs have just slammed down after 9/11. Everything's closed. And she's wondering where she's going to get her next meal at. And so she's not working for the CIA anymore. Her school's closed. And, so she has no choice but to say yes to Mayor Giuliani. And so she starts going around in the helicopter, to at least one of these funerals in the 5 boroughs, these great big cathedrals every day, 7 days a week. And she does memorial masses and funeral masses. And so that's when she's, obviously singing the Ave Marias. That's why I said if I had $1 for extra for every Ave Maria I sang for the next 6 months after 9/11.
Yeah.
It was always requested. Always.
Of course. It's the standard. So, all right, I want to go back. There were always the stories that John Le Carre and Frederick Forsyth were probably spies. Tom Clancy sort of fed into that he was, involved in things like this. All of us that, we get BBC and British TV, so now we all think we know what tradecraft is and spycraft is. How do you do your research into that? What did you decide was to adopt into your book? What did you reject as being ridiculous? What did you just sort of make up because you thought it would work for this particular character and these particular plots? Did you have a technical consultant, so to speak?
I had several. For instance, I'll just give you an example. I would see these spies, and I would see them, carrying weapons. Well, being a non-military person, I would have no idea what that weapon was that they used on that person, blah, 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 And so go ask them. Those guys always remember that stuff. Oh, yeah, well, back in 87, that would have been a blah, 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 and then I, research it, and Google it, and like, yeah, that looks right, So
author PPK.
I talk to spies all the time about, the holes in this story that I didn't know much about. And a lot of it was weaponry, martial arts, techniques like serums that you inject into people.
Low darts.
More of the combat. Talk to MI6 and CIA.
Ninja smoke bombs. Did she ever use ninja smoke bombs? I mean,
no.
I mean, what are we doing here if we don't have ninja smoke bombs?
Yeah. Strategically, who decided, why the strike would be here, or the bust would be here. And so it really helped to wait for the statute of limitations to be lifted on this material. We're talking 25 years. That's why this book's out now and not earlier.
Oh, because it's security clearances and things like that.
Absolutely. Because until then, people wouldn't have given me those answers. They'd be like, what would you like to know?
Right.
But, after it's clear, yeah, it's different. And
that's okay, interesting, because how do they decide? I mean, I don't know how many people remember this, but after the Soviet Union, I mean, there was a patchwork of countries, and you could literally go, 200 miles and be in 4 or 5 different countries. So, there needs to be plan A's, plan B's, and plan C's. And I imagine you're operating within some sort of operation of law if you're looking to make arrests. If you're not looking to make arrests, I guess it doesn't matter so much. But how do you decide, that this is going to be in what is now Slovakia versus the Czech Republic versus, I don't know if I have the geography right, but Montenegro versus Croatia versus, Serbia. That's a good question. Like the second book is about the Bosnian War. That is such a complex thing when you start researching that, because first of all, you have a Yugoslavia, and then they're released from the USSR, and immediately, and most of them were religious groups, not just, Croatian Serbs, exactly, they were particular regions, and those were, they might be Serbian Muslims versus Croatian Muslims, etc. Okay, and everybody is wanting to have their own little piece of the pie. But some people want a bigger piece of the pie. There's, so you have these border issues start, when they're trying to, decide how is Yugoslavia exactly going to be, split up. And that's what that whole war was about, is that some people wanted more land. And so they said, well, we're just going to knock them off their land by killing them all. And that's why the Western world had to get involved. Americans were involved in that war, British, French, several Western countries. Yeah. Because you can't really allow people to do that, to go in and just wipe out a culture, so you can have more land. Yeah, it gets tricky, doesn't it?
It sure does.
Especially sometimes it feels that way in America when we only remember that's sort of the origin of America, but you can overcome your origin, I suppose. No. So, anyway,
it's a lot like what we did to the Native Americans.
Yeah,
if that's what you're referring to.
it is sure, of course. Of course. I'm saying it without saying it, but we've talked about it in other episodes of the show where it's been, actually part and parcel of the episode. Though analogies be analogies. All right, so you're with Shadowpaw Press. How do you find them, and how'd they find you?
Well, actually, I'm not. I self-published through THAW in Canada, so I am not with Shadow Press.
Oh, Mickey's a free agent. It's not just Shadowpaw; it's just mostly Shadow. Well, this is exciting.
Yeah, I don't even know what you're talking about. To tell you the truth, I am with Mickey. That's
right,
true,
the publicist. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't think everyone is with that publisher.
That makes perfect sense.
Certainly, I'm not.
Yeah, because they tend to be more supernatural, horror, sci-fi.
He does have a lot of those authors. All that, paranormal stuff and fantasy and such. Yeah, he does. I know there's one other espionage author that he has.
Oh, I'm sure.
I guess we're kind of there on this list.
Oh, well, when you assume, when you're the podcast host, you only make an ass out of yourself, and that's fine. I have big, strong.
Just edited it out. I should have said something when you mentioned that earlier, and I was like, I don't know what he's talking about.
Yeah, no, I'm not. I don't edit out my mistakes. There's no reason for that. This is not that kind of show. This is actually part of the whole show is not necessarily book interviews, though it always turns out to be with that, because you can always learn something. But part of the reason for the show is to find out about things I don't know about from people who know about them, so I don't actually have to do my own research or get sucked down YouTube rabbit holes, which at some point will everything leads to ancient aliens. So.
Well, I'll put a flag out there for Tell. I really enjoyed my experience with it. So. And that's a whole other story about why I decided to self-publish. But when I did decide, I liked all the things that they offered in one nice package. And I certainly, being as busy and involved in as many things as I am, did not have the time to try to do each of those things myself. So I was just happy to find a one-stop shop that I liked and that had a good reputation. And I have been very happy. So shout out to Talbot.
Can I go to something that might seem rather banal, but does the opera union or guild that you were part of, do you still get benefits from them? Do you get royalties, and do you have a retirement plan through them and health insurance and stuff like that?
I do not. I have not been in AGMA for some time. When I moved from New York City to after 9/11, doing all those funerals, I wanted to divorce myself of International Opera City and a whole lot of other things that goes with that. And so I decided, after all this time, I was 49 years old, I would come back to the Midwest, find a place, and start a music conservatory of acting and singing. And then later that actually exploded into all kinds of instruments and dance and martial arts and everything else. But I decided that I'd had enough of that life. I didn't want to live out of a suitcase anymore. I didn't want to put up with the things I didn't like about it. I had sung everywhere and with everyone I wanted to. And so therefore I retired early. And not to say that I didn't ever sing opera when I came out to the Midwest, but it was more like for, Italiana Festa and that kind of thing.
Special occasions.
And so those were equity stages. And so I didn't. I gave up my union because it's very expensive, dues and that kind of thing. There's no reason to be a part of that. So to answer your question, no, I do not have a pension. It never did work that way. Is
there a dirty underbelly to the world of opera?
Oh, absolutely.
Really?
It's a nasty, nasty world.
Let's hear some.
In so many ways. Well, first of all, average at least with the Americans. They encourage, the whole industry encourages people to pursue the career. But once you're out of graduate school, you find out it's such a small world, and especially in America, where there aren't near as many slots, to be filled as there are people auditioning. And I find that rather common, And I can't tell you how many people I went to undergrad with at a good institution and graduate school at a good institution that never, ever could get started and ended up, they might as well sell shoes. So they had to go back to school and do something else after all that training and sometimes having success in competitions and performances and such, but yet could not break in. And one of the hardest things about that is, so after I was out of graduate school, I moved to New York City because that's what I'm told I have to do. The most expensive city in the country to live in.
Practically.
All right. And so, so here you've got all this experience. You've won all these competitions. And now they say you need to find auditions for agents because they're the ones that are going to get you the gigs because you are a soloist. So you contract for each gig that you get. Like you might sing a Tosca in La Scala, and then you're going to sing, a Carmen over here in the Met, and so, you're an individual contractor. So you must have an agent that will set up auditions and get you those jobs. And then, of course, you pay them anywhere from 10 to 20% of what you make. And so you think, oh, yeah, great. So they give you a big list of agents and they say these are A-level agents. These are B, C, D, E, etc. And, and since I had, really good training and was involved with international opera houses, I thought this would be a breeze. And so I decided I would go back to Europe and I would start auditioning for the major opera agents in Italy, Austria, and Germany. And I was living in Munich, so I was kind of central to all that. And I would try to have at least 4 to 5 auditions a week, and I would have to travel by train because they might be anywhere, right? And I would get there, and I would sing, and back then there wasn't a lot of email and that kind of thing, so everything came by snail mail. And lo and behold, I think I would have nailed one, and then what would happen? I would get a letter saying, well, Miss Sparling, we love the way you sing, but we're really looking for someone, blah, blah, blah. And so I had a little storage room in the apartment I was renting, and I started tacking these rejection letters all around the room. It didn't take long, and the walls were full. So here I am. I've got all these credentials.
We all did that at some point.
Awards, and nothing. In the meantime, my parents are paying rent in Munich, Germany, right? And I'm starting to feel like a real idiot and a real loser. All right. And so the last one that I had to do, I had to take a train for 5 hours up to Dusseldorf. Now, this is in the late fall, cold rain all the way up there, right? And my accompanist and I get off the train, and we're trying to hail a cab. Well, like all large cities, and that kind of weather, So I end up getting drenched. So now my hairstyle is gone, my mascara is running. We finally get a cab. We get there, and I'm shivering. And I'm a soprano. I'm going to have to get up there and sing, some high C's stuff, And I'm shivering. So my accompanist is trying to get me dry. He's trying to get me, warm. And I'm sitting there for an extra 2.5 hours. There's some kind of delay.
Right.
And I'm the last one. Okay, because and at the meantime, I'm getting psyched out because here's a British singer that's very famous that's trying to get, because this guy's really big. And, she's trying to get a bigger agent. And so she's sitting there psyching me out saying, oh, I've sung here and I've sung there. And I've had this agent, I've had that agent, And I'm obviously 15 years younger than her and just getting started. it was just a miserable afternoon. So by the time I walked in there, he and his associates were there, and they were talking because they had been delayed, and they were all hungry and such. And so he goes, "Oh, Miss Sparling, yes, I heard about you from the Metropolitan Opera." He's like, "What would you like to see? Because I know you have 5 things, but I really don't have the time. So you pick one, and then I'll pick one." And I said, I couldn't believe I said this. I said, I just want to get out of here and get to my hotel room and get warm and get a meal. I'm starving. I'm hungry. I'm cold. I'm shivering. So you know what? How about you just pick one and we'll call it a day. This just seemed like a wasted trip to me, right? And he kind of looked at me funny. Now I'm speaking in German, by the way. And he says, "All right, diese Dagte, das." I'm like, okay. And so, my accompanist finds the music and, about ready to start. And he goes, "You do have that last interval, right? That important interval." And I'm like, "I have that important interval in spades, or I wouldn't have it on my list."
Right.
So I'm being a smart ass, right? And so anyway, I sing it and it goes okay. And he stands up and claps and gives me an ovation and says, "I really want to take you out to dinner and talk to you. You are the real deal, girl."
Well, there you go. Maybe being in a bad mood was your key.
I land, when I don't care anymore, right?
Yeah.
And I'm to my last, wits about it. Yeah. And so, I get the best, most elite European agent there is.
Excellent.
So, that just goes to show what persistence will do, and I learned a good lesson from that, but that's also one of the big things about opera is they put you between a rock and a hard place when you're starting out, because they say, "Well, you got to go get an agent," but then the agent says, "Well, I can't sign you because you haven't done anything for me to, find any research and everything. How can I trust you on an $8,000 a night contract, at some of the biggest opera houses in the world, but you haven't done it anywhere except apprenticeship, And so what do? So you go to a lot of cocktail parties and you schmooze and you schmooze and you schmooze. That's how I got my American one after that. It's just by getting enough people to keep telling this person that I wanted that you need to hear her. She's really worth your time, And finally, he went, "Okay, yeah, I'll make an appointment."
Well, it seems to me that the agents should know that that's the problem. They're the ones who are supposed to answer that question for you, to find you those mid-range gigs that they can get you so that you can build some sort of professional. I mean, so that seems like part of a big gap in the.
It's a bit of a con game.
Yeah.
I mean, to be honest. So, I trained a lot of people at my conservatory, and most of them are Broadway singers. They run into the very same thing, by the way, when
I'm sure.
get to that point. So, what I tell the kids when they're in high school or early college, if they want to do this is what you're going to be up for. You have no idea how hard this will be, okay? But if you have the talent, if you really want to develop it, and you think you've got the guts and the thick skin to do it, then let's do it. But if you can do anything else and be happy, don't be a professional singer.
Okay. Wow. Well, interesting missive. You're not my first child prodigy I've had on the show. I had another pianist, Robert Emery, I believe was his name. Anyway, the show's not that old, probably within the last 6-7 months. Anyhow, all right, let's get back to the book. So, is it published? Is it out? Is it available? I know you're writing the second, so
this has been out almost a year. It was end of August 24 when it came out. So it's available on anywhere where books are sold. It's in hardcover and soft cover and digital. So ebooks. So literally anywhere in Europe and obviously America, Amazon, everything, Barnes and Noble, Australia, it's in Booktopia, Canada, Kobo, Canada, Amazon. So, I do have a big website where I put all my social media stuff on and all the podcasts and blogs and everything I've done. It's ksparlingbooks.com, and there is a page that just has all the places you can go to buy the book. So yeah, it's out.
And the title?
Mission THAW, THAW.
Okay, and the sequel coming out soon, or book 2?
I don't know exactly when. I am doing the last touches of that, and then it will go to editing.
All right.
So can't give you a date on that, but I will let you know.
Okay.
About the second book.
Last question. If you associate any particular song with this conversation or your work or whatnot, except Ave Maria, I'm not subjecting you or the world to Ave Maria one more time. What would that show be that you would like to be the outro to this song, this show, this podcast?
Well, I want to tell you something that I have done that is way out of the box for authors, but it's because of my background. So I know composers, and I have a very, very good friend that's a wonderful musical theater composer, has also written some modern operas, and he, as a gift, wrote a theme song for Mission THAW, and one of my students recorded it professionally for me and sang it, because I kind of passed my singing at this point. And that, I think, is so cool. And the reason he wanted to do it is I've always wanted this book to be, adapted into film, or a Netflix series or something like that. And so he thought if he wrote a theme, a spy theme like, James Bond and Mission Impossible has and everything, and then also composed a theme song that we just get that produced and then start a YouTube channel for the book. And so this book actually has its own theme song.
Okay. Well,
so I would say that. And it's called I'm a Warrior.
Is it on YouTube?
It's on YouTube, and it's the Mission THAW channel.
Mission THAW
channel. Yeah.
I'm a Warrior. Let's see. A couple commercials. I'm a Warrior lyric video Mission THAW. About 11 months old?
Yep, that's it.
Got it. All right, folks, you've heard it. We have our own theme song to the show, authorized by the owner of the song. So look at that. We're doing an outro without copyright infringement for a rare change. Anyway, remember, de minimis, it's an outro. Nobody goes in for the outro. All right. Okay, Sparling, thank you very much. Great luck with the book. Very interesting story. I did not know opera had an underbelly, but I guess I'm not surprised. Thank you for sharing some information on trafficking and what trafficking really is and just all of that. Very interesting stuff. And thanks for being on The Garden. And for those of you who are here by accident or you're fans of K's, just subscribe to Garden of Thought on any of your major podcast feeds, and you'll generally get 2 to 3 shows per week. Sort of, I like to say, the variety of Joe Rogan, but without the broness, embrace of conspiracy, certainly without the celebrity, and certainly without the success, unfortunately. But you can help with that. But it's sort of like if you turn on the History Channel at 7 o'clock at night and just leave the TV on until 3 or 4 in the morning, you'll get that kind of landscape. So if you think that sounds fun, you can listen. If you don't, subscribe anyway. Just skip the shows you don't like. And if you have any interest in pro wrestling, the third show is The Gospel of Thomas with my co-host, Mr. Thomas of Major League Wrestling. And we talk to people in wrestling, but often about non-wrestling things, or at least it's interspersed there and some interesting stuff there. Thanks again for listening, and you'll hear from us next week. And you're probably already hearing I Am a Warrior in the background. If my fabulous, wonderful, sexy, and beautiful producer, who happens to be my wife, is peppering that in there. Thank you, Kay. Beautiful meeting you. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Go ahead and just pretend I'm not in your world right now, yet somehow it's not the end. to choose. It's your turn to pick someone. Search your heart.